Welcome to the first episode of the Uncaved podcast. Today we are joined by Dr. Nathaniel Peters, who is the director of the Morningside Institute, which brings scholars and students together to examine human life beyond the classroom and consider its deepest questions through the life of New York City. The Institute is located right here, just outside of Columbia University, and we are filming it in their office here at Riverside Church. Dr. Peters received his BA from Swarthmore College in linguistics with a focus on French and Latin, his M.T.S. from the University of Notre Dame, and his PhD in the history of Christian thought and Christian ethics from Boston College. At Boston College, he taught courses in the Department of Theology and lectured in the Perspectives program, BC's Great Books program. He has published articles and reviews in Religious Studies Review, America, Commonweal, First Things, and Plough Quarterly. Without further ado, here is Dr. Peters. Well, hello.
Hello.
I'm very excited to be here. What a beautiful space. Thank you so much for letting us come here so generously.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, for everyone listening, we're inside of Riverside Church, which is really, really beautiful right outside of Columbia in New York. And Morningside has this really beautiful office here. So that's where we're sitting. You have the nice books behind you. Yeah, what have you been reading recently?
Gosh, what have I been reading recently? Well, at home, I've been reading the third volume of Winston Churchill's History of the English-Speaking Peoples, which covers kind of the 17th into the kind of the end of the 18th centuries. So right now I'm just getting to the part that's about the American colonies. And it's a lot of fun because you have Churchill's kind of driving voice and energy behind it in the background. And it also gives me a little bit of knowledge of kind of time periods and people that I might not otherwise have. But it's a lot of fun to read. One of the things I like about Churchill is that he's probably the only person who is not famous for winning a Nobel Prize. He's famous for other things, and he also just won a Nobel Prize on the side and nobody knows about it.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah.
But
wow.
Yeah, but he won the Nobel Prize in literature for his history writing.
Literature.
Including this. Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Not for
cool.
peace.
Not yet, fair enough. Very cool.
Yeah.
Wait, so is that for work or for fun or?
No, that's for fun.
For fun.
For work, I have to think about what I've been reading for work. I suppose, well, I've been reading stuff to prep for things that we're doing here. So at the moment we're doing a reading group of Alexander Schmemann's For the Life of the World.
That's right, yeah.
Alexander Schmemann was an Eastern Orthodox thinker who I think was originally Estonian, but grew up in Paris and then came to the United States and was influential in the founding of Saint Vladimir's seminary, Eastern Orthodox seminary just north of us in Crestwood.
Wow.
So we're reading this kind of classic text of his, and that's been interesting.
Oh, fun.
And yeah.
Very cool. Nice. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit more then about this reading group? Well, the reading group's part of a bigger endeavor you have here at Morningside. Right. If you could sum up your mission, I think in just a few sentences, what would that be?
Yeah, sure. So Morningside brings students and scholars together to explore important human questions in light of kind of great texts, important authors, but also the cultural life of New York City. So some of what we do is connected to Columbia's core curriculum in a series called Living the Core. Some of what we do, maybe gets into questions that underlie kind of debates in politics or debates in culture, trying to explore their philosophical or religious roots. We also go to museum exhibits or operas or plays or concerts, and then kind of have discussions about those and try to use those as sources for examining human life and how we should live well. Just in the same way that we would use, a work of Plato or Kant or a novel or something like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I talked to my friends back home about Morningside and they're always just like, what? Because it really is a unique experience that we have here, right?
I'm so glad.
Being in New York City, obviously, and then having the luxury of being students, being able to, read and to explore great texts. And yet at the same time, to be able to have, discussions with other students, with other professors, and to be in a city where you can do those things firsthand, right?
Yeah.
Learning about operas and then seeing them, in Lincoln Center, right?
Yeah.
So good. So yeah, we saw an opera like a couple of weeks ago, last week. When was that?
Oh yeah, we went to the Elixir of Love.
The Elixir of Love, yes.
Yeah,
so there's a Morningside group there that went. Nicholas Chong, one of our professors, gave a talk beforehand about the history of opera. We had a meal, and then we all went together. And that was like, I think, very much an epitome of a Morningside experience, right? Where it's more than I would get out of school just hearing about an opera. But also it's more than even if I just saw the opera by itself, because the sort of surrounding discussion we had about all those sorts of things was something that really enriched the experience, at least on my end.
No, I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, one of the things that I've thought about recently with respect to our work was a comment that I think somebody made even just earlier this week, that in his art history class, the professor could tell him how many statues were on the outside of a cathedral, or kind of give him a bunch of, maybe statistical, empirical knowledge about works of art, their history, buildings, maybe even kind of give how things have been interpreted, some of their historical background. He said he can tell me the number of statues on the outside of a cathedral, but we never get to the question of what the meaning of life is. Or we never get to kind of how we should live, whether we should live. And one of the things that we try to do here is to tackle that question in various ways, in a way that a number of students don't find coming up in their classes. Sometimes people do have these conversations, and that's great. Hopefully we can be another place for them to do so and add to the good. And otherwise, we try to create a space where those important human questions can really be wrestled with.
Right.
And outside, somewhere between the formality of the classroom and just kind of conversations that happen spontaneously in dorms, both of which are good, right? Both of which are good and are necessary. But hopefully this can offer kind of intimate but also serious and guided explorations of important ideas.
Oh, that's I think well put, right? Somewhere that merges the dorm room conversations about the meaning of life with the classroom, right? Because it's funny to me too, seeing how a lot of these discussions we have in the Columbia class, like contemporary civilizations, that goes through the history of philosophy and Western thought. And then also, the conversations I have with my friends, I think in theory, they should have a lot more to do with each other, right? About the meaning of life, how we, make decisions, et cetera, as young people, et cetera. But it's funny that in Morningside, I think the bridge is actually there quite a bit. So one of the seminars or series that comes to my mind is the one you did on decision making. That was
thanks.
Yeah, the beginning of last year. So you who was the author that you read again? Who was talking about whether or not to get married? That was him.
Oh, that was Charles Darwin. Yeah,
that was Darwin. Yes.
There was and in some ways that seminar kind of came out of a sense that it can be very hard for students to make serious even minor decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Should I go on a date with so-and-so? Should I apply to this internship? Do I want to do I want to take this class, etc.? But as the decisions get kind of bigger, they can become more daunting, especially when we don't have as much control over them, and when they ask a lot of us, or they might ask a lot of us. And so, one of the reasons we wanted to have that series is to kind of offer people some tools so that they could think about how to do this well, and also kind of recognize that this is just a part of life. It's an inescapable part of life.
That's right.
And so the fun thing that I found as I was kind of looking for sources for this was the pro-con list that a young Charles Darwin made in his diary about whether or not he should get married. one of the funny things about it is that there's no like naming of a spouse. There's no kind of or like a fiance or a girlfriend. There's no sense of like, here's this person. Do I want to spend the rest of my life with her? But it's just like, okay, do I want to get married? Would it be nice to be, a bachelor who gets to live in London and kind of read whatever he wants?
That's very academic. He was like, more money for books, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So much of his
do I give up?
consideration.
It would require giving up, money for books. It requires giving up peace and quiet. Like, you have to deal with her annoying relatives.
Yeah.
Maybe she won't want to live in London, and then you just end up like fat and boring and stupid in the country.
I was like, I think exactly.
It was also very much.
Yeah.
It was also very much the kind of the list, and this was one of the things that I wanted to kind of draw out in our conversation. It was very much the list of someone from the outside looking in, the list of someone who can see all of the downsides, but doesn't have a real knowledge, because in a way there's no way for him to have real experiential knowledge of what it would be like to be married. What's kind of what it's like on the other side. And so I think that was one of the puzzles that I wanted to explore. How do we make decisions about things where you can't just make the pro-con list in a way that you could about, what house to buy.
Yeah,
like what house to buy,
yeah.
or like what computer to buy, or, okay, I want to invest in stocks. These are the four, sort of investment monitoring rating services or whatever.
Right.
Which one is the best? Well, that's an easier decision to make than,
should I get married?
Yeah, then should I get married, or do I want to go to grad school in philosophy, or do I want to go into finance or something?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just kind of a much bigger one.
Which is the question, those are the questions that need the most answering, and yet people seem the most like woefully unprepared by in their schooling. And what I appreciate too, I think I came into Columbia with a very anti-ivory tower mindset, I think. As much as I love philosophy, I'm an engineering major because for the longest time I thought, the academy's futile at this point. Like, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to learn about the meaning of life by just reading Plato and Aristotle all day with a bunch of people that do philosopherology rather than real philosophy, right? But I'm really so appreciative of Morningside and the work you do here, because something like the decision-making seminar series, which is about how people throughout history, really wise people too, have gone about making decisions. I think very much grounds, like you said, the sort of real life conversations that we have amongst our peers and our friends outside of the classroom. But also, that the fact that we're able to actually draw on scholarship of those who are wiser before us. And I think that also, helps me appreciate philosophy more too. It's not just something that people do in the academy when they, are bored and have nothing else to do. But obviously it's like, a very practical pursuit when done properly, right?
Yeah. And, one of the things that I think people forget, or that can be very easy to forget, is that historically philosophy really is a question about how to live and how to live well, what we know, what kind of access we have to the world. And there was, in the last, 20 to 30 years, there's a French philosopher named Pierre Hadot who wrote a book called Philosophy as a Way of Life. And he was trying to kind of recapture the ancient sense of philosophy, not as, a way of drilling down into really specific kind of narrow questions, as important and helpful as that can be, but as a way of exploring how it is that we can find happiness in life. And so I think that kind of a view of philosophy is one that guides us. How is it that we should deal with pain and suffering? What does it mean to be a good friend or have a good friend? How is friendship something more than just, a little marker on a social media page? How is it actually something that enriches our life and forms us and guides us? And I think another thing that we try to do as well is to take religious sources seriously.
Yes.
So we're not
I was just about to bring
kind
that
of
up.
Confessional institution. We're not a Reformed or a Catholic or a Jewish or something organization. But I think contemporary universities, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, just don't really know what to do with religious sources or questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And therefore, they sort of put them outside the purview of of inquiry and the purview of discussion.
Sure.
Whereas the relationship between faith and reason is a really important question that people should wrestle with and that people have wrestled with. And so why not, instead of just like wrestling about it wrestling with that question on your own, why not come together with people who have some experience and sources that have really insightful things to say and do it together?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of the things that we wanted to do. You know, at one point, when we were, I think it was a seminar series, it was either on John Henry Newman, the great English theologian, or it was in a seminar series on faith and reason. But I had a student who himself was religious, so he didn't object to this personally, but he said, you know, gosh, this sort of topic seems in some way kind of a little more overtly religious than we find frequently in the academy. And he was worried about sort of what the impression that might make on his peers, and you know, whether we were the kind of organization he could invite them to. I can't remember exactly maybe what his concerns were, but I remember that was part of the concern. And one of the things I said to him in response was, you know, well, questions of faith and reason have been an important part of university life and discourse for much longer than they've been kicked out of university discourse, right? Like Absolutely. That's a very recent truncation. It feels natural, and it feels like a kind of weird religious imposition to put a question like that on the table and to take it seriously outside of like a chaplaincy meeting or a Bible study or a prayer service or something.
Yeah.
But in fact, that's not, that hasn't been the norm historically.
Absolutely.
And I don't think there's a good reason to have it be the norm, because there are, as I said, important aspects of human life that we do think about, and that we should think about using kind of really valuable insights that have come up in the past and in contemporary thinkers.
Absolutely.
So that's the kind of thing that we want to do here, to embrace kind of philosophy as a way of life, embrace literature and art and music as potential sources not only of beauty but of important truths that connect back to those important human questions, and to kind of examine religious sources as ones that are offer us valuable insights as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you spoke on so many things there, but one that comes to mind, I was going to bring this up too. I was wondering too, about the fact that you happen to be a religious person, and it happens to be the case that a lot of the texts we draw on happen to be by religious people. And what I appreciated is, I actually came to college not a religious person, kind of, with a view almost disdainful towards a lot of religious people, actually, because it seems to be the case that in the university, as we conceive of it now, that there's certainly a divide, right, between the religious and the reasonable, right? And it seems to be the case that the greatest answers that we can find to the sort of things that merge practical wisdom with the sort of wisdom you get in the university from like learning things is drawing from people who were religious and had used, I guess, what they learned in the classroom, et cetera, as a way to live their life in an applied manner. And it's funny to read people like Augustine in class, right? Which in the most secular university, it feels like sometimes Columbia still draws upon knowledge of people who lived before and did have religious reasonings for their actions and all these things. And I think when you approach philosophy in that manner, which I think is done quite rarely actually, it just becomes so much richer, right? And that's what you do here, I think. And I think that speaks very much to the ethos of sort of Morningside too. Is that right,
so I'm glad that that's been your experience. I mean, one of the things that we also wanted to do when we started was we didn't want to have this become kind of a closed or self-congratulatory circle.
Yes.
A circle where people either praise themselves for being, enlightened and right thinking and on the right side of history, or where they praise themselves for being opposed to all that crap and opposed to, all those people who were in fact wrong thinking, right?
Well put.
And so one of our goals, which I think has happened, is to have kind of the unifying factor being a genuine thirst for the truth and a genuine thirst for for how we should live well and what reality is.
Yeah,
how we can apprehend it. And so that has been something that that I hope we've been able to foster here, and to kind of cut out the, I don't know, sort of undue ideological or sort of identity based I don't know, lenses, or kind of an atmosphere that would be constrictive, instead of something that's open to all comers. And my sense is that we end up with a good mix of people from different backgrounds, people who are more liberal, people who are more conservative,
absolutely,
people who are religious, people who are not, and so that's been, I've been really pleased with that.
Absolutely.
I had the early on in our, I think in our first year, there was a senior who was born in Mexico, came to the U.S., became an American citizen, came from a kind of less privileged background. And one of the things he appreciated about us, as he put it, was that it wasn't like a bunch of finance bros, standing around eating brie and salmon shorts and talking about how they appreciated Homer, which I thought was a great image.
Oh, absolutely. Salmon shorts, hits too close to home.
And I was also glad that I had thrown out a pair of salmon shorts a couple years before. So that I could have never inadvertently spoiled the metaphor. Yeah,
because you like brie a lot too. I've noticed, right?
Sometimes, yeah.
But I think that's absolutely right. I mean, well put. I mean, yeah, something I've noticed myself too is that despite having all these discussions of polarization in college campuses, and I mean the ideology, which I think is often there, right? When professors have one fixed way of thinking that, permeates into the dogmas of the classroom, for better or for worse, right? I think what I do appreciate about Morningside is I come here for a dinner seminar by professor or by, discussion on whatever book. And each time I'm, very grateful to see people who are earnestly pursuing truth and like listening. And regardless of political affiliation or lifestyle, whatever, I really appreciate that. I think that as the unifying factor of people who come here. And I think that serves as a template too, more broadly, of the way in which the university can seek to be cohesive, so long as the motivation for being there is earnest, right? And I think it also dovetails very nicely with the way in which you approach art and culture, right, in your work. So I think part of the reason why too it would sound pretentious for a bunch of finance bros to be talking about Homer is that I think it misses the heart, I think, of the beauty there to a large degree. And to have these cultural outings where we can talk about very human experiences, right, in opera, right, or in the Met cloisters, etc., and see how we kind of merge with the rest of history. That seems to be something that I think is innately humbling too, right? I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Again, one of the things that we've wanted to do is take advantage of the kind of the incredible beauty and riches that are available in New York City. And if you think about something like the cloisters, that's that gives you not only kind of particular works of art, but a kind of whole atmosphere and ethos that is very difficult to find in the States. You almost have you in almost all cases have to go to Spain or France or Italy or Germany or something to find something akin. But our hope with that or with some of the other outings is to be able to come back and not just say, oh, that was really beautiful, or oh, that was really cool. Of course we want to enjoy beauty. And I think I should pause and say that one of the things that we want to do is not only talk about how to live well, but also actually do it, and one of the things that I think is an important component of living well is, insofar as one is able, is to be able to enjoy beautiful things.
Amen.
With other people who you have some kind of kinship or friendship with in some way.
Absolutely.
And so, I think it's important to try to get a group of people who maybe know each other to some degree, but also can get to know each other better in the process, to go and enjoy Michelangelo's drawings, or to go and enjoy Verdi or something, just because that is that's sort of a way of living human life well that can fall by the wayside and that we can be too busy for or overlook. So it's important to just do that as an end in itself.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But it's also important to be able to try to learn how to think about great works of art and to see how they kind of speak to our own yearnings and desires and questions. One of my favorite examples of this was when we went to see, this would have been in 2018 or 2019, probably 2019. We went to Haydn's The Seasons at Carnegie Hall. And Haydn's oratorio, The Seasons, is not like a work of staggering depth. It's beautiful, it's fun, but it's, like a lot of peasants talking about life in the countryside. There's no like tortured psychology or something, right? But the Professor Chong, who we mentioned a second ago, gave a great talk on how one of the things in the background for this work is a concern about the waning of religion in the Enlightenment, and a concern that if religion disappears among the kind of elite educated classes, what is the moral foundation of society going to be? Because we haven't had a kind of non-religious grounding on which our communal sense of right and wrong is built. So what would it be? So that anxiety or that question is in some way in the background of this otherwise kind of seemingly lighthearted work.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
one of the people sitting around the table who had gone to the Women's March earlier that weekend, I can tell the date of this because this was back when we had annual women's marches.
Sure.
Had said, I never thought about that as an important question. I never thought that, that I don't know that she would have said, I never thought that society needed a moral foundation, but the question of like, what is the founding of our morality as a people had just never really occurred to me. And that's great. If Haydn can be kind of the point of entry for that person to consider that, that's all the better. And that's kind of the reason why we do some of these artistic cultural things.
Absolutely.
Because it puts those important works before us. It helps us appreciate their beauty, and also helps them see kind of how they fit into the bigger picture.
Right. There's like a dialogue happening.
Well.
That's not just, exactly. The Salmon Shorts Finance Bros, right? Seeing something behind a glass pane, if anyone here happens to be a finance bro, this is all tongue in cheek. Okay? We very much appreciate your work. Okay. But in any case, I think there's something to be said too about like integrating that into our own lives and like obviously learning from art. And I think the other thing you brought up, which I think speaks to the heart, I think, of what Morningside does really well, is the community building aspect, which I think is too often lost by the university as well. Yeah,
and that's one of the other things that we wanted to do was really build up a place where people feel like they either know each other or that they would like to get to know each other better and that they feel welcomed. I think one of the, we hear a lot on college campuses about either self-censorship or the need for free speech or concerns about free speech just being a kind of ideological cover for
wanting to say the terrible things that we would say if we had free speech.
Exactly, something like that. And one of the things that's proposed as a solution for this is more intellectual diversity, which I think is good and valuable. And the way that kind of university discourse is frequently, or the way that people propose seeing university discourse is as a debate, right? So you have one side of the debate is there, it has all the voices. What we really need to do is bring in the other side of the debate and have people who can argue well for that, kind of create the space for students to have their say, disagree with the dominant narrative. All of that is to the good. I think that it becomes a lot easier to have some of those difficult conversations, though, when the context is less of a debate and more of a conversation where people view each other not necessarily as opponents, but as either friends or collaborators. Or to put it another way, it's a lot easier. Oh, I don't want to say that it's a lot easier, but at least it can be easier to disagree about kind of serious matters that get to the heart of human life when you know the person you're talking to and when you think that they have your best interests at heart.
Oh, 100%.
And it's very hard to do that in a kind of big auditorium with, two prominent speakers in the course of 20 minutes of Q&A.
Yes.
It's easier to do that in a place where those ground rules have already been established, right? Where it's clear that we're not here to have kind of a winning and losing side, and where it's clear that, the people around the table really have their best, have your best interests at heart, even if they think that, even if you and they have a serious disagreement about what those best interests are or something. Yeah. I mean, I smile as I remember a talk that we had from a professor at Villanova who was writing kind of a guide to life for college students or something like that. And she was urging the students, like, look, just instead of having these, like anonymous sexual encounters and, friendships that are largely mediated by text messaging and social media, if you find that you're interested in someone, just ask that person out on a date. That doesn't mean that you're marrying that person. It doesn't mean that you have a serious relationship. It just means that you want to get to know that person a little better. So kind of basic sort of human life guidance 101 that unfortunately is needed in this day and age. And we're sitting, there's this kind of small community, right? Small group of people around the table. And one of the girls basically says, but like, I kind of think that the man should be the one leading and taking the initiative. And if I ask the guy out, like, isn't that sort of taking that off the table? Isn't that, not undercutting him, but kind of taking the lead in a way that's kind of inappropriate? And there was another girl at the table who was completely shocked. I don't think that she expected in a kind of university or quasi-university setting to hear anyone argue positively for male headship in any capacity.
Yeah, right? Even if it's just asking out.
Even if it's just asking somebody out, like and the other girl stood her ground and said, no, that was what she was trying to argue for in this way. But the key thing was that after that, they, continued a really productive and happy conversation.
Yeah.
They were glad to see each other a couple weeks later when they came back. That disagreement wasn't something that people backed off of, or, the student who had the unpopular view said, oh no, I'm so sorry. Of course I would never want to imply that. But the student who had the more dominant view also didn't completely discount this other girl. And, they were able to kind of move forward together instead of having that be the end.
Yeah, and that right there is an example of a conversation seminar that obviously yields very practical life advice,
right? And
also where the friendship, you can have friendship through disagreement, through earnest conversation, and I love that. What a great story. I think I know exactly who you're talking about in that story too.
You may,
but no, I heard very good things at that seminar in particular.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think that shows you sort of the range of sorts of conversations we have here. I mean, very, very serious conversations about what it looks like to have romantic relationships amongst young people in college settings, right? In a very serious but also lighthearted manner, and then also everything from there to how we should conceive of like religiosity in particular artistic settings, for example. So, I mean, it's funny to bring all these things up, and you talk about Haydn, you talk about, seminar on dating, but I think they all bring together, the same core principle that we've been talking about today, which I think is very wonderful. Yeah. And yeah, so we were running on our 30-minute mark. Is there anything left that comes to mind as something you want to tell the world while we have you here?
No,
Any
I would
wisdom?
just say that,
Yeah.
I would say that if this kind of thing is of interest to you, if you like the sound of what you've just heard, please feel free to come and visit us.
Yes.
We're more than happy to, we're always happy to welcome guests.
100%.
And our website is morningsideinstitute.org.
I'll link
you
it.
can find events on our calendar, and come on by and bring friends.
And some are online too. My mom just is going back to get her degree, and my sisters are in college. So I sent her the link to one of the reading groups you're doing.
Yeah.
And they were so excited. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah. No. Sometimes we'll have online lectures or lectures downtown in Midtown Manhattan. So it may be easier for some to join that way as well.
Incredible. Well, what a pleasure it was having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ashley.
Yeah, appreciate it.